Five Nights at Freddy's 3 is an indie horror game developed by Scott Cawthon as the third entry in the Five Nights at Freddy's franchise. It's a well-known entry in the series for a few reasons, the first being it introduced the series to a lot of people's favorite character, Springtrap. Outside of that, the game is famous for its setting, as Fazbear Frights, the horror attraction based on the original Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, the locations that were present in FNaF 1 and 2. It's also famous for not being all that great as a game. FNaF 3 really doesn't need an elaborate introduction. I'm sure if you're watching me, you know what this game is and what it's about. But do you really? Already, I can hear your initial answer.
Obviously I know what FNaF 3 is about. It's about William Afton coming back to life as a furry so he can kick his 50-year-old son's ass.
And sure, maybe on the surface that's the story, but I'm convinced that there's something here that we missed. Something so on the nose and obvious it's taken 8 years for anyone to notice. And it's about the Phantom animatronics. Now, to quickly recap what these things even are. Throughout FNaF 3 you can encounter several different animatronics that do not kill you. These are the Phantoms. In-game there's a Phantom Balloon Boy, Phantom Freddy, Phantom Chica, Phantom Foxy, Phantom Mangle, and Phantom Puppet. All of these Phantoms can be encountered in their own unique way. BB has a chance of showing up when you pull the camera system up or switch cameras. The Puppet can specifically appear when checking one of the hallway cameras, Phantom Chica can appear on an arcade cabinet, Phantom Foxy can appear in your office, Phantom Mangle can be seen in a corner camera, and Phantom Freddy just kinda walks on by. And for a while, people didn't really have a solid explanation for what these characters were. All of them with the exception of Chica used their FNaF 2 models as a base. So why then is Chica different? Why do they only begin showing up when Springtrap appears? And why does every single time you get jump scared by one of them, does your ventilation start failing? Well, I do think I have some answers here, but let's talk about the two most common explanations I hear. The first is that the Phantoms are just hallucinations induced by the building's poor ventilation system. Although this doesn't explain why they don't show up on night 1, we can probably say that the stress of Springtrap being nearby is another reason that the Phantoms show up, as the main playable character's fear of Springtrap makes him start seeing things. This explanation is fine and pretty easy to swallow. In fact, PhoneDude even backs this up by saying that you have to keep the air flowing, or you'll start seeing some weird stuff. But I have a couple problems with this idea. First off, you can see Phantoms without ventilation failing, most prominently with Phantom Freddy and Phantom Balloon Boy. You can see both these characters and not have ventilation go off, meaning that when you see them, clean air is still flowing. So then maybe it's not the air, but it's the night guard. We're pretty sure we play as Michael Afton in this game, so maybe it's the stress of his past coming back to haunt him. But we also believe we play as Michael in Pizza Sim, a game that comes after FNaF 3, and what do you know, no Phantoms there. They're restricted to this game, this one location. So then let's look behind door number 2. The other most common explanation I hear is that Springtrap is somehow creating these phantom images because he now has supernatural powers. This would explain why they only start appearing when he arrives in the building, and why when ventilation fails, he begins moving faster. These phantoms are actively helping Springtrap when they attack the player character, which again points to them being his minions or something. The problem then becomes Scraptrap. If Springtrap can do this, why can't Scraptrap? Again, this points more to the Phantoms being tied to the building, not Springtrap. And it's not just the Phantoms. In fact, if you're a viewer of this channel, chances are you are not subscribed, so stop being a Phantom on my end and click that subscribe button. So what then am I offering up instead? What is my explanation for what the Phantom animatronics are? Well, let me start by saying this. If I'm right about this, then the Phantoms are way more important to the story than anyone could have guessed. But in order to explain what I think the Phantoms actually are, we need to talk about some of the FNaF series' established rules, specifically concerning how an animatronic becomes haunted. Across the series, various animatronics, dolls, or other items have become haunted in one way or another, from the FNaF 1 gang all the way up to the Mimic, who is not possessed by a spirit, but instead by the human emotion of agony. But one thing that binds almost all possessions is an element called remnant. Remnant is first mentioned in the book The Fourth Closet, and is then reiterated on in Pizzeria Simulator. Remnant is a substance formed from a couple key ingredients: metal, human flesh, and a human soul. This creates remnant, which can essentially be referred to as a haunted metal. Because the missing children were stuffed inside of the animatronics, this combination of their bodies, their souls, and the metal of the mascots creates these possessed animatronics. It's worth pointing out that remnant also does not mean a ghost is unconscious. Ghosts can and do still operate the animatronics as they please, but this brings me to my next point. Ghost behavior is not human behavior. Oftentimes in the FNaF lore, ghosts do not realize that they are dead. This is something we see in Susie, the girl inside Chica, and a character in the newest Tales book named Travis. Both of these characters were unaware that they were ghosts, and both of them follow the same rules. Something else that's common between ghosts is that they will often not realize that they're dead unless their body is discovered. Since Travis died while stuck in a box thing, his body went undiscovered until his ghost opened it up and realized what had happened. Presumably, no one had ever really found the missing children's bodies, which is why the FNaF 1 gang acted so strangely and aggressively. They were confused kids who didn't know they were dead. To contrast this, we have Charlie, who is the spirit inside the puppet. Charlie died outside of Freddy's and was very likely found by her father. At the very least, we know she was never stuffed. This would then explain why Charlie is so much more lucid than the other animatronics. She was the one who gave life, as it were, to these animatronics, as in, she probably woke the spirits up instead of letting them rest. This even explains dialogue from the puppet in UCN, such as the line,
"The others are like animals, but I am very aware."
She knows that the others are not like her. She's at peace with the knowledge that she's dead, but the others don't know that. So with all these rules in mind, we need to get to some animatronic tracking. Let me lay out every location we know these ghosts have been in. First up, FNaF 2 location, the Wizards are possessed. However, it's not just the Wizards. It's made a point in this game that the Withered animatronics were being used for spare parts when creating the newer toy animatronics, which includes Toy Freddy, Toy Bonnie, Toy Chica, the Mangle, and Balloon Boy. I know he doesn't have toy in his name, but I consider him an honorary toy. And based on what we know about Remnant, it being haunted metal, it can be surmised that taking Remnant from one animatronic and putting it into another will lead both of them to be possessed. This is why I believe the toy animatronics act so freaky. It's not a bug or a glitch, it's them being haunted by the same metal that exists in the Wizards. We know Remnant can transfer hauntings, that's kind of what the fourth closet was about, so in this case, that's what I believe. But then the toys are scrapped and boxed away. The Wizards are then repaired and become the first game's cast. Ultimately, what happens to this cast is left a little ambiguous. We know that this scene with them being dismantled can't happen after FNaF 1 because Phone Guy is still alive to refer to the Springtrap room being boarded up afterwards. So that means they had to be repaired and walking around for the first game, while Springtrap was likely rotting in an off-camera room that was left out of the building's layout. Regardless, we know that this happens at the FNaF 1 location given the layout of the building. My best guess? Afton dies before the building is opened up, and the FNaF 1 gang is scrapped when the building closes, which is why many of their parts can be seen in Fazbear's Fright. So, still keeping track here, these spirits have traveled all the way up to FNaF 3 and have not discovered their bodies. So, technically speaking, they should be around, right? Yes, and they are. They're the Phantoms. Now unable to actually walk around in their animatronic bodies, the spirits instead take on these gnarly, phantom-like forms reminiscent of their old ones. And this actually explains a lot. First off, if these phantoms are real ghosts, it explains why they can affect the real world. They can make ventilation fail, or make sounds that lure Springtrap closer to your office like Mangle. It explains why they show up with such different forms as well. These are just the bodies that they remember having, and they remember them a little differently than we do. This explains why Mangle and Balloon Boy are there as well. The metal in their bodies would have originated from the remnant of that first group of kids. These are once again their spirits. Who knows, maybe Foxy and Mangle are the same spirit, just in different forms. But I know you want more, so I'm gonna give it to you. We know that these possessions happen as a result of haunted metal. Without that haunted metal, you don't have a ghost. But what appears in the player's office? What sits in front of them the entire game? A box. A box with a mix of parts from the toys and the originals if Foxy's hook is anything to go off of. All that haunted metal is sitting right there in front of you the entire time. But I still have more proof. Let me ask you this. How did Susie, the girl inside Chica, die? What do we know about the circumstances surrounding her death? Well, we know that she was playing the Fruity Maze arcade game when she was lured away. And how do you activate Chica when playing FNaF 3? By seeing her face on an arcade cabinet. It's her. This is another memory of hers that is manifesting as this ghost, as Phantom Chica. How about the puppet? Well, this is where my theory goes from interesting to maybe a little crazy, but hear me out. Based on FNAF 6, we know that the puppet, unlike the other animatronics in FNAF 2, was not scrapped. However, it's also likely that it was not repaired like the Wizards. So where did it go? Well, what if it came to Fazbear's Fright? How do you summon the puppet? You need to see her on the cameras. However, unlike the others that spawn when you see them on the camera, you don't see her in her phantom form. It's her real one. What you're seeing here, I believe, is the actual puppet, who is present in the building, appearing both as the actual animatronic and a phantom to torment you. But wait, if these are the actual dead children's spirits, then why are they attacking you, the player? Shouldn't they be going after Springtrap? Actually, no. Based on what we know from the novel trilogy, when Afton wears the spring Bonnie suit, the animatronics don't recognize him as anything but another animatronic. Hell, this is even how it works in FNAF 2. You're given a Freddy head because it confuses them. So to these confused spirits, you're the only person in the building, and they're either angry with you or they want your help. Want your help? Wait, what do I mean by that? Well, FNAF 3 has two different endings. The normal or bad ending is the ending you get by simply beating every night of the game, without doing anything extra. But the good ending? That good ending is obtained by playing arcade games that are themed around the animatronic spirits you're up against. BB's Air Adventure for Phantom BB, Chica's Cupcake Game for Phantom Chica, Stage 01 for Phantom Freddy, Mangle's Quest for Mangle. It's consistent. In fact, I think this ties my theory about Phantom Foxy and Phantom Mangle being the same spirit even tighter together, since Phantom Foxy is the only one of the Phantoms to not really be playable in a minigame. And of course, happiest day for the puppet. Your goal here in FNAF 3, the way you bring about the good ending, these mini-games are about revealing to the spirits that they are spirits. It's about putting them back together, telling them that they're not being ignored, they're seen. But it's melancholic all the same. That's what I think the good ending actually is. It's about putting the phantoms to rest. They're spurred on by Springtrap and they need to be told the truth. But is the good ending canon then? Well, that's a bit hard to say. There's one big elephant of a game in the room that I have not addressed yet, and that's Sister Location. And this is where I have to say this. I don't think MOLTEN MCI is true. MOLTEN MCI, for those who don't know, is the theory that after Afton disassembles the animatronics in FNAF 3's End of Night minigames, he steals their remnant to power the Funtime animatronics, supported by a line from Henry in Pizza Sim. When describing Molten Freddy, Henry says that it has more remnant than any other animatronic. Since Molten Freddy is a mixture of the Funtimes and Ballora, it was theorized that this is where the MCI kids' souls went. And this, I have to say, I simply don't believe. Not because I don't think the Funtimes are haunted, but because we don't really have reason to believe they're haunted by these specific kids. In fact, we knew before Sister Location came out that the animatronics were actively being rented out to parties, and likely used to kidnap and kill kids in that way. As it stands, I think my explanation that the Phantoms are actual ghosts makes more sense and is backed up in a lot of ways. If there's something I missed here, be sure to let me know. But back to the good ending. Do I think it's canon? I'm gonna have to say yes. I think that this good ending effectively eliminates the initial 5 missing kids from the story. It explains why we never see them show up again, including Golden Freddy. If these characters were really still around after FNAF 3, I just feel like we would have seen them by now, especially Golden Freddy. But because we haven't, I can only guess that Michael's plan to free them, it worked. He showed the ghosts that they were dead, they got to live out their happiest day with that knowledge, and then the building was burnt down to bookend their stories. But that fire didn't eliminate Springtrap, nor did it eliminate the puppet, which is why their stories continued into the next game, Pizza Sim. If I'm right, this one explanation solves a lot of the FNAF timeline. This singular short story alone together might help us solve way more of FNAF's plotline than any other story thus far, with the exception of all those mimic stories, I guess. But understanding how ghosts operate led me to this conclusion, and I'm endlessly excited about it. However, I wouldn't be doing my due diligence if I didn't argue against my findings. If you ask me, the biggest problem with my reasoning is this short guy right here, Balloon Boy. If these phantoms really are meant to be the missing kids, what, is this our Bonnie stand-in? Now, if you ask me, the reason there was no Phantom Bonnie in FNAF 3 is probably because Scott didn't want to confuse players by having 2 rabbit characters in antagonistic roles like this. I mean, if there was a Phantom Bonnie, chances are he'd have the same eyes all the other phantoms do, as well as withering, meaning he'd look fairly similar to Springtrap. That's what I think it was anyway. Scott trying to discern the threat that can kill you from the threats that cannot. But lore-wise, it's definitely a snag. If what I'm saying is true, then there's 2 possibilities. The first is that parts of Balloon Boy would have come from parts of Bonnie, which I mean, sure, maybe he's got a haunted battery or something. Or 2, Bonnie's ghost just didn't feel like attacking Mike, which is unfortunately equally valid. All in all, I do still really like my theory, and I think it does stand up on its own, especially with this new book. But before I end this off, I do want to say, no, I don't think Scott planned this out all the way back in FNaF 3. Whether or not he originally intended the phantoms to be actual ghosts or not, the fact remains that he probably didn't even have the idea of Remnant by that point, let alone anything involved in this book. But that doesn't mean the books can't look back and clarify. Didophobia was our FNaF 4 story, but Alone Together I'm thinking might be our FNaF 3 story. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed watching, be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Peace.